Good afternoon, CPhI. I'm sorry I could not be there in person with you because of a last minute glitch and I had to cancel my flight. I wish this recorded presentation would be useful to you, and I will make myself available also to answer any questions after this talk. Warning letters, approvals, and business disruptions have been significant challenges, and particularly, I think data integrity issues that have surfaced have been growing and becoming more global. Data integrity breaches in assurance of data integrity were noted in India and China, but this is not a local issue, it's a global issue today. So the question really is, I think, the mutual recognition of inspections between Europe and US. Does this agreement hold some answers? First of all, I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and I'm so pleased to see this agreement being implemented. I remembered the initial agreement was signed while I was at FDA in 1998 or something, but it was never implemented. But this is an exciting opportunity. So let me share some thoughts on some aspects of how this might help. But I'll trace the background uh, to this broadly first. Um, my background is I'm ex-regulator. I used to be the Deputy Director Office of Pharmaceutical Science at Cedar FDA. I launched the PAT initiative and the pharmaceutical quality for the 21st century. And I also served as the FDA lead for ICH negotiations for ICH Q8 and getting Q9 and Q10 started before I left FDA and went on to Sando to lead their biosimilar development in Oberhaching, Germany. Currently, I have two hats. I'm the founder of my consulting company, Inside Advice and Solutions. My advisory practices focus on complex generics, biosimilars, and orphan drugs primarily. I also serve as advisors on GMP remediation and also to conduct a culture of quality training with emphasis on data integrity. My other hat is I'm president of the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Technology and Education. This is a collaboration among 17 American universities focusing on pharmaceutical technology, pharmaceutical engineering, pharmaceutics, and other disciplines. And it is essentially funded by US FDA. So we have been in collaboration with US FDA for last decade, and more recently, FDA renewed its research manufacturing sector research initiative grant to National Institute for Pharmaceutical Technology and Education. And with this, I believe we are building a national system here to help the regulations be more science-based, as well as to find ways to improve assurance, availability, and affordability of medicines for US citizens and all over the world. I think currently US is hurting in bad way, and we are all trying to work together to find ways to address some of the challenges of availability and affordability, and also build assurance of quality. One of the areas of interest today at NIPT really is to think about a quality scorecard. FDA has been in discussions with the industry for last several years on quality metrics, and consensus on quality metrics has been difficult. At the end of 2016, FDA reissued its draft guideline on quality metrics and selected three to go forward with, despite lack of full agreement consensus with industry. We have been thinking about building a quality scorecard at the request of US FDA for their new Office of Surveillance for Quality within the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. And much of the discussion on quality metrics has been on lagging indicators, such as invalidated OS rate, failure rates, patient complaints, and so forth. But at NIPT, we are thinking more in terms of cause and effect. And if you look at this figure, I think on the number 4, technical competency, risk literacy, systems orientation, and how these come together is an important element. In the US regulations, education, training, and experience is a requirement for all who work under GMP conditions or environment, but there is no objective way of defining what is adequate education, training, and experience for people in industry, for FDA inspectors, for FDA reviewers, and for consultants. So that's an element that is in need for attention. And if you look at then science technology application from R&D, manufacturing, QC, and pharmaceutical quality system, then you have regulatory review, inspection, surveillance, and then you have business models, profit margins, cost, time constraints, strategy, tactics, culture. And so much of the cause of the effects that we see upstream to the business model are hinged upon education, training, and experience. So, what are the residual uncertainties and process capability for monitoring CAPA improvement and pharmaceutical quality system once FDA has reviewed and approved a drug, uh, and then you are going to transfer the technology and knowledge to operations, and you're going to go through process qualifications and so forth. So how is that link, the cause and effect relationship determined? Then time to approve, effective risk mitigation, profitability, reliability, and efficiency metrics. How are these connected? So these are this is a model that we are trying to think about what we're calling by design factors, leading indicator um, that will relate to the lagging indicator FDA is searching for in their quality metrics at the moment. So the 3 quality metrics that FDA selected at the end of 2016 was lot acceptance rate, product quality complaint rate, and invalidated out of specification rate. The annual product review time to complete that was dropped. What I wanted to do with you is to step back more than a decade, in fact, to the early part of 2000, 2001, 17 years ago almost, to share with you what did we learn when we launched FDA's PAT initiative. When I say we, I'm putting myself back at FDA in the year 2000, 2001. One of the fundamental learning that we had from the PAT initiative discussions, especially at the FDA Science Board, was that in the small molecule product solid dose manufacturing world, the cycle times and OS rates were high. Now, these data that I'm sharing with you were shared by Dr. G.K. Raju from MIT, and this was a survey of the top 5 to 10 companies in the US. So these are the top companies like Pfizer's and others. This data is from their organizations. So when I look at a modified release dosage form of a B type, the average cycle time was being reported as 95 days. Standard deviation of cycle time was more than 100 days. Exceptions, deviations increase cycle time by 50%. Exceptions increase variability in the cycle time by over 100%. Capacity utilization of system was very low. It was a bit embarrassing to put the number there, but it was 10% or lower. And issues such as dissolution test were often the culprit. And when you look at the batch and overall cycle time distribution, you see that on average 95 days, but you have so many deviation, and often the root cause was unknown. And again, at the time, it was too embarrassing to put the number on the y-axis, but now I have put that number in 600 days. So although so what that means is after 30 days, either the batch is thrown away or simply root cause is unknown. So the invalidated auto specification rates for certain dosage forms, particularly modified release and other complex solid oral dosage forms, is very high. And PQRS completion in 30 days is not possible. Now, when I say this, at the same time, I recall a number of European companies had raised a dispute resolution that used to come up to my level so many of the formulations that were approved in Europe when they were brought into US, the rejection rates were high. I'll give you an example of a dry powder inhaler product. Europe manufacturing was without any problem, but in US, literally 50% of the production was being thrown away because of deviations in how the specification was set. And once the specification is set, it's very difficult to change that. So the point that I wish to make here is there is, despite ICH Q6A and all other ICH guidelines, when you go back to the fundamental aspect or of how do we set specifications and how do we use development reports, there is still significant difference between Europe and US. And in that sense, these differences will show up, and we are showing up always in the GMP arena. And now, since we have this mutual agreement, there might be an opportunity to do something to these differences and heterogeneity that existed. So that's where I'm going with my talk. So if I look at some of the companies in India which have been under remediation for several years now, and they're just now coming out of correcting all that, putting computer software controls for assurance of data integrity and so forth. And all of a sudden, you see their OOS rates going high, and particularly the European inspectors reacted recently quite seriously to that increase in rate, and that poses a dilemma. So if I take invalidated out of specification rate as a metric, it's very high in US. I'm reflecting back on the start of the PAT initiative. There were no questions that their PQS was effective. They were throwing away or tolerating the low efficiency and the large cycle times and so forth. There was no bad eye concern. Bad eye means breaches in assurance of data integrity concern. There is a 2 to 3 sigma barrier, which is a particularly a US barrier, which got established after the generic drug scandal and how Judge Volin in USA versus Barr made his decision of what constitutes testing into compliance and other aspects, and how US was setting specification without a risk-based consideration of a development report information and so forth. So that's the history. Now, over the past 5 to 7 years, many companies in India had struggled with bad eye, starting with Ranbaxy whistleblower in 2012. There's no reason to believe that um, they were Six Sigma or the error should be different. But if you have data integrity issues, you can be Six Sigma. But now I think after corrections, we have concerns of large OS rate, invalidated OS rate, and so forth. So how do we resolve this? So one aspect which I think is a blind spot or a blindfold, because in my practice, consulting practice in India and even in US, I often ask this question: do you know USP tests are not intended for batch release decisions? And I get nasty answers back. What are you talking about? What nonsense are you talking about? What people don't understand is Dr. Woodcock herself made a presentation on 9th of April 2002 or 2003 to the FDA Science Board, saying that people are not understanding the compendia is a market standard, and most people use it as a batch release test. There is a type 2 error built in, and the failure rates are going to be always there, and the root cause will be unknown. So this was Dr. Woodcock herself making this presentation in the early part of the initiative. And USP itself has a disclaimer notice, and it surprises me that FDA reviewers themselves and most companies use USP on a daily basis, but have never read the disclaimer. At times, compendial standards take on the character of statistical procedure with multiple units involved and perhaps a sequential procedural design to allow the user to determine that the tested article meets or does not meet the standard. The similarity to statistical procedures may seem to suggest an intent to make inference to some larger group of units, but in all cases, statements about whether the compendial standard is met apply only to the units tested, not to the batch. And we cut and paste the wording of USP monograph test onto a batch, and we create a massive bad eye problem. Unless you want to throw away 30% or to 10 to 20% or 30% of your production and to tolerate the bad eye, that's another option. But here is a blind spot, and here is an opportunity, because how we use compendia in US and Europe is still different. And perhaps this mutual agreement will start exposing these elements. I would urge the inspectors on both sides, US and in Europe, to hone in on this topic, because this is a CMC review topic, and many inspectors in the GMP side would hesitate to raise this point. In fact, the divide between CMC review and US still continues, and their integration, their collaboration is essential. And this is a point where they can collaborate, and I hope they will. So when you get into trying to do investigations, you don't even know the type 2 error rate of your dissolution test and other tests, because you have simply verified, not even validated in a traditional sense, the compendial method, because that's not never been the practice. And in the physical attribute measurements, how do you know your measurement system is capable and stable, so that you can even think about whether your process is stable and capable? This is fundamental, and we are stuck here often. And this is something I believe the inspectional agreement can start really finding a solution, because the solution has to come back to bring a harmonization not only on the compendial aspect, how we set specification, and clearly the inspection aspect. So if there is a challenge, and there is a challenge now of concern about invalidated OS rate, why not use it as a opportunity to learn, collaborate, and improve? And I'm hoping this mutual recognition will give this opportunity. So today, if I look at, we have quality metrics. Industry has pushed back. 80% of FDA warning letters are related to bad eye, breaches in assurance of data integrity. Prices have increased. FDA wants to boost generics, but maintain the gold standards with a new review process. We have shortages, recalls. We have 2 to 3 sigma barriers. We have a number of challenges, and the US-EU agreement is there. And the picture that I see here is uh, we have some companies in US done very well to go to Six Sigma, and I'll share a quick example of that. And that's my CPhI annual report deals with is Amgen. How did Amgen reach Six Sigma 3.4 defect per million opportunity? But they've done that with assurance of data integrity. You could be Six Sigma when you just make up the data. So that's the challenge. How do you distinguish between companies which are truly Six Sigma or just made up Six Sigma? And then how do you deal with the high invalidated OS rate? And how do we deal with this 2 to 3 sigma barrier, which is there in how we do business today? And how can we change that? That's an opportunity because that's fundamental to the challenges we are facing. I have no association with Amgen, but I had an opportunity to take a deep dive in their journey, and my report to CPhI deals with that. And I hope you will pick up a copy of the report, and read that. So, in the biotech sector, uh, the way we use compendia is very different, and especially for product monograph, there's none. And therefore, the way Amgen progressed their journey to Six Sigma took a long time, but they did that by getting to effective root cause investigation and then putting in prevention. And that's something the solid dose manufacturing unit, particularly in the US, struggles with because of the historical legacy of from Judge Volin decision to generic drug scandal to the way we set specifications and the way we inspect. And here is an opportunity to really make a difference. I'm writing a book on how to build an effective quality management system, and I mean this is fresh off that publication that I just submitting to the publisher for this. Is what are the gaps? What is GXP? What is an effective quality system? The what question. We only focus on that. But the how questions is how are we assuring quality currently? And one of the things that is happening is what just occurred over the last several months in France with levothyroxine, and the same thing also occurred in New Zealand a few years ago. And we are going through the same thing in US. The nocebo and the placebo effects have exploded. They have become real, and we have ignored those effects, saying that's useless, meaningless, and so forth. But they are real effects now. And with the focus on real world data, we are struggling to have assurance of quality for the generic drugs with the patients and with the healthcare practitioners. So we have to listen to the voice of patients. We have to reduce the errors. We have to address our blindfolds, and we have a high error rate. High could be 5, 10, 15% is a high error rate, and which interacts with breaches in assurance of data integrity. That's where we are. So, why assurance is critical for therapeutic equivalence is a fundamental question that we have to address. So, how we move forward? I think our traditional assurance of quality has been management standards. This is what Mike Kopcha and Lawrence Yu just published a paper in International Journal of Pharmaceutics saying that the future of pharmaceutical quality is Six Sigma, not the methodology, but the 3.4 defects per million opportunities. And to get there, we have to get to performance standards. What are performance standards? Performance standards are leading and lagging indicators of performance. And we are struggling to get a handle on those performance metrics. So today, as you'll see in my CPhI report, what I've argued from constructive development theory of adult human development is we have been socialized to say guidance is regulations. Most companies don't take ownership of quality. They depend on FDA. FDA tell me what to do. FDA never manufactured a product ever, and but we still ask FDA to tell them what to do. How can you assure quality that way? You cannot. So I think Amgen's example is an example which shows how you break that 2 to 3 sigma barrier. How do we move forward to to getting to the root cause. And on the small molecules, the solid dose form, I think FDA is pushing very hard for real-time controls and continuous manufacturing. That's great, but that's not going to solve the problem. The problem is much bigger. I think we have to get the entire sector to the Six Sigma with or without continuous manufacturing. And that's really the book that I'm reading, and this is the sort of outline for the book, is how we assure quality today, how our development in adult development interrelates with pharmaceutical quality system, how PQS can become a competitive advantage, why assurance is needed is increasing. So please collect a copy of the CPhI report, and you'll get this scenario that I have discussed there. So anyway, so the question that was asked of me is EU and US mutual recognition inspection of medicine, how will it help? And I think the collage that I have prepared here, I gave a talk recently for Waters Corporation in India. I called pharmaceutical bad eye bad eye is a pharmaceutical hurricane. I mean, this was before the recent hurricanes, but I think we are struggling, and we need to engage everyone within the sector to find solutions. And I really think the mutual agreement is more powerful than we have realized, and it can be more powerful than we have realized. And the topics that I discussed, really, if the European and the US inspectorate would take heed from me, and in their efforts to reduce the resources, to collaborate, think about this as a challenge. Think about the heterogeneity that exists, not just in inspection GMP side. They have to reduce that, but to take a step forward and link it to how it sets specifications. So the difference and heterogeneity reduced is an opportunity, but how is a question. Residual uncertainty after ICH specification and compendia, that is a source of some of the problems. Think about quality metrics, invalidated OS rate, CAPA investigation, time to resolve GMP deficiencies in US and Europe is tremendously different right now. And at the same facility, Europeans will give the GMP certification back, but 2 years later, FDA is still beating up on them. This is difficult right now, and we need to get to risk-based decision and avoid shortages. I was at FDA with a client recently, and on a shortage issue, and I was very disappointed. I think I am a patient myself now, and the shortage actually impacted me, and FDA didn't so anyway, that's a different story. But the opportunity is great. The challenge is great, and I wish this mutual agreement will go beyond just saving resources and actually address an important problem that would be tremendous for the regulators, for the industry, and for the patients. I hope this perspective was useful, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be there if possible to answer your questions on the phone, and thank you for listening.